Yeah, I think that's a nice segue into something we touched on earlier, which was the life coaches at Matt Johnson's stuff. And on the it's complex. Like on the topic of payment, etc. I do work with synthesis, and I work at those retreats, and I personally have no problem with someone having the agency to decide to pay for an experience if it's held with integrity. That's the key thing. And so this is the kind of the fulcrum that I keep coming back to. It's who's doing it, what are the intentions, where's the transparency, where's the honesty. And I have like a bugbear around the word psychedelic wellness, which is something Ronan Levy was talking about in the rise of psychedelic capitalism. And it's not so much the idea of people taking psychedelics not for medical reasons, that I'm totally cool with, and I don't mind there being places for people to do that. But there's something around the word wellness that feels kind of off to me, which I'm not quite sure what it is, but then also that kind of links into this whole, what we were talking about before, this influx of life coaches and all sorts of different practitioners who are now suddenly weren't there kind of 20 years ago, but now have come out of the woodwork. I'd love to circle back to this point you were raising about people projecting their own thing into the experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, it's the Johnny come latelys, no question about it. And it's that notion of sort of angels and moths are both drawn to the light. So what we see, and again, our friend Jordan Hall has pithily kind of framed this up. He says any kind of edgy or progressive transformational movement, right? Going back to Studio 54 or Warhol's Factory or things like Burning Man, or you could apply it to the psychedelic Renaissance as well. You start out with the artists, the deeply committed fringe, right, populations who are just doing the outlier thing because of love of it, can't not, whatever it would be. Then you end up with the patrons, right? So there are folks with cultural capital and potentially economic capital, and they have a keen eye for what's next, right? And so, in Burning Man as an example, that would be like the Larry Page, the Sergey Brin's, the Elon Musks, right? So they had influence in Silicon Valley, but they were early adopters of the emergent movement, which was fundamentally warehouse folks in Oakland and anarchists and punk rockers and all this kind of stuff. But they're like, hey, that's fucking rad. Let's add some resources, energy, signal, and even let's just be enthusiasts and participants. But after that, the next crew to twig on are the sociopaths. The carnies, right? The carnies are there not for any dying love of the thing, but they realize it's hot and it has pull. And so they position themselves as carnival barkers. Come on, come one, come all, right? Come on over here, I'll pss, 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 right? And this is a little bit like Pinocchio being led to Pleasure Island, right? And then the final crew to arrive are the tourists. They can't fucking tell the difference. They don't know an artist from a carny if they got hit upside the head with it. And they are massively naive and undereducated or informed about their choices, but the sociopaths are presenting it, whether that's a turnkey camp at Burning Man or personal transformation for psychedelic wellness in a package for 6 easy installments or whatever it would be. And that pattern just seems to happen. So what we're seeing in the piling into psychedelic wellness, psychedelic coaching, medicine retreats, all of these things is a bunch of fuckwits coming into a business they have no depth or understanding. I mean, it's like if you first came across ayahuasca from a fucking podcast, and now you're holding anything to do with it from the leadership side, just fuck off. And that sense of utter lack of depth, utter lack of experience or respect or appreciation for the lineage, Western or indigenous, no understanding of the ethics of right relationship to the therapeutic role, and a complete blurring of your own boundaries because you're probably still in the hockey stick curve of your own deep dive into novelty and sensation seeking. You are absolutely part of the problem. And so what we see is I've seen more than I care to count number of new clinics, new wellness retreats, and suddenly people who have had no prior professional background, training, or experience are not only offering medicine retreats and workshops, they're offering entire schools of life, sexuality, relationships, they've just gone hog wild in their confidence as to what is their zone of expertise. And then you ask them, how are you funding this? How are you standing this up? What's going on? Oh, well, we're raising all of our money from in medicine ceremonies. So you're getting a bunch of naive, overcapitalized seekers right, with extra money in their pockets, who are getting self-selected for high dollar psychedelic retreats by Connies who are representing more than they can deliver, getting them in tripping balls, pair bonding, no boundaries, no true consent, and opening their wallets to fund, oh my gosh, this is the next best thing, this is going to save the world, and you guys are going to do it. And then at the same time, and this is what now brings us to Matt Johnson's critique, at the same time, these folks are so sloppy in their epistemology and their sense making about what this all means. What do these non-ordinary states mean? How do they interact with our waking psychology, our roles and responsibilities, and even what are our ontological interpretations of the wild ass shit we see out there? And they come back spewing some garbled mishmash of a new age pastiche of magical thinking, and then holding forth like that's fucking reality. And then they're imprinting that onto their patients, clients, whatever it is, with no shame, no self-awareness, and they're just puking and contaminating the experience of these naive recipients into a worldview that is absolutely just lousy with viruses and bugs. And now these people in these super susceptible states are having these tearing experiences between their prior worldviews and realities, and now what they think is actually going on, like, oh, we're all star beings, or oh, we're the next nation who's going to vibrate to the fifth density, or oh, you've just contacted your holy guardian angel, or, you know, like fill in the blank ad infinitum. And so Maddie and I actually had this conversation because we were standing up a project for Hopkins on PTSD and breathwork. And it was going to be deeply within the holotropic tradition. And Stan Groff is an emeritus advisor to the project. And even in that, right, even in just hyperventilatory holotropic breathwork, and the idea that we were going to be wanting this to be able to be interoperable with the Veterans Administration and working with, you know, military service people who had suffered PTSD, that we wanted to be able to, we kind of had a set of agreements or affiliations with some really wonderful NGOs in South America, in Africa, and India to be working with child populations, you know, who are coming out of refugee camps, who are coming out of war-torn areas, all sorts of things that's just getting in the way of vibrancy, living, and learning. So we're like, okay, so we can't even actually port into this study the epistemological framework that Stan developed for over 30 years in holotropic, which is perinatal and prenatal matrices, past life regressions, all these kind of things. You're like, hey, that, because Stan was coming in from the transpersonal psychological methodology. He was divining and determining what the data was and what it looked like for them through the 70s and through the 80s and through, you know, predicated with shit piles of Sandoz finest in the 60s, right? So they were out there on a raggedy edge of a specific discipline. That discipline doesn't necessarily intersect with where Matt's been coming from in the neuroscientific Hopkins side. And it certainly doesn't intersect with a cross-cultural framework that could work in Catholic South America, that could work in, you know, that could work in Hindu or polytheistic India, that could work in indigenous or tribal Africa. And you can, because then you run into a situation where, let's say, and we can use these as, I would say, analogs, but like, even if we just stick with this breathwork experience, you provide somebody a 3-hour or a weekend session, and wouldn't you know it, it actually works. It does all the things you're hoping for, right? They break down, they have shuddering traumatic releases, they have profound insights, they have some access to information that has been repressed, buried, or sort of encoded into their systems that now is available for them to make sense of. And you guide them through a worldview, an interpreting lens that is incompatible with the stakeholders in their world, their friends, their family, their ministers, their schooling, their professional responsibilities, whatever it would be. And so now you get this upside down effect where the more profound and transformative the experience is, but if you've given them, if you've just, you know, bolted on without their knowledge or consent or understanding a specific epistemological framework that is non-interoperable with their world they go back to, you can actually massively re-traumatize them. Because then they go back and suddenly they are now at odds. What did you join a cult? Did you lose your fucking mind? Have you been possessed by a devil? Like, fill in the blank. right? But you are no longer of us, making sense with us about what that meaningful experience was. So you create this schizoid break between the way I used to make sense of the world and the way I'm now being told the world makes sense. And so Matt's point in that article, I think, was, he sent it to me and I was like, fuck yeah, dude, I totally, and I pulled a paragraph out. I was like, this right here, the fact that untutored, underinformed facilitators, whether that's sanctioned and certified or underground and self-appointed, are quite often smuggling in their own muddy ontologies without anywhere near sufficient respect for let the mystery stay the mystery. Our goal is to provide scaffolding and structures for people's own sense-making and meaning-making and development. And the best thing is to practice pathological restraint, right? What we've seen, what we think it all is, all those kind of things is not only less than relevant, it's actively counterproductive.
Amen. I've seen it happen properly.